They told you attachment theory is the master key to relationships. Anxious, avoidant, secure, memes, podcasts, TikToks. Everyone seems to live and breathe it. But here's the question nobody asks. Is attachment theory still real science? Or has it become just another shiny label that reduces people to buzzwords and stereotypes? Is it truly the lens to understand love? Or is it clickbait, dressed up as psychology? The birth of a theory. To know what attachment theory means today, we have to strip away the noise, the quizzes, the Instagram reels, and go back to its raw beginnings. Because attachment theory was never born on social media. It wasn't a trending hashtag. It wasn't designed for self-help books or relationship coaches. It began with one man, haunted by a simple, painful question. Why do children suffer so much when they're separated from their parents? That man was John Bowlby, a British psychoanalyst, born in 1907, raised in an upper-class family. And here's the irony. Bowlby's own childhood was marked by distance. He was raised by a nanny, barely saw his mother, and at age 7, was shipped off to boarding school. The pain of separation wasn't abstract to him. It was lived. It was carved into him. And so, when he grew into his career, he didn't just study children from an academic distance. He studied them with the eyes of someone who knew what that separation felt like. Now imagine this. The mid-20th century. Hospitals had strict rules about parents visiting sick children. Mothers were discouraged from picking up their babies too much, told it would spoil them. The culture was harsh. Emotions were weakness. Attachment was dismissed. But Bowlby was stubborn. He argued something radical, that the bond between a child and caregiver wasn't a luxury. It was survival. That the child's cry for its mother wasn't manipulation. It was biology. That humans were wired to attach, to seek safety and closeness. And if that closeness was disrupted, it wasn't just sad. It was traumatic. Enter Mary Ainsworth, an American-Canadian psychologist, sharp, observant, and just as determined. She wanted to put Bowlby's ideas to the test. So in the 1970s, she designed an experiment that would change psychology forever. The strange situation. Picture this. A toddler plays in a room with toys. Their mother is present. Then, the mother leaves. A stranger enters. Then, the mother returns. All of it carefully staged. All of it carefully observed. And here's what Ainsworth found. Some children cried when mom left, but calmed when she returned. They trusted she'd be back. They were securely attached. Others barely reacted at all, turned away, and seemed independent. They were avoidant, and others clung, panicked, and even resisted comfort. When she returned, they were anxious or ambivalent. 3 styles, 3 patterns of connection, born in the lab, born from observation. This was groundbreaking. For the first time, psychologists had a framework to describe the invisible threads between children and parents. But here's where the story twists. Attachment theory was never meant to be Instagram friendly. It wasn't designed to tell you why your ex ghosted you or why you overthink texts at midnight. It was about toddlers, children, the raw foundations of human bonding. And yet, as the decades passed, the theory began to migrate from nursery rooms to therapy rooms, from children to adults. By the 1980s and 90s, researchers were applying attachment theory to adult love. If a toddler could be secure, avoidant, or anxious, what about an adult in a relationship? And the answer seemed to fit. The avoidant adult pulls away when intimacy gets too close. The anxious adult clings, worries, and panics when abandoned. The secure adult trusts, connects, and balances both. It made sense. It clicked. But science doesn't stop there. It asks, is this true in all cases? Is this universal? Or are we forcing a child development lens onto something far more complex? Because here's the truth. When Bowlby and Ainsworth began, their focus was limited. They studied small groups. They worked within their culture. And what began as observation slowly became labels. Labels that people now wear like tattoos. I'm anxious. I'm avoidant. I'm secure. Labels that can help, but also hurt. Because people forget that attachment theory was never meant to be destiny. It was never meant to reduce love to three neat boxes. It was meant to describe tendencies, not define entire lives. And yet, today, attachment theory has become something else entirely. A multi-million-dollar industry. Books, coaching, podcasts, content designed to hook your pain and sell you the cure. Here's why your avoidant ex ghosted you. Here's the one text that will make them come back. Here's how to fix your attachment style in 30 days. Science blurred into self-help. Self-help blurred into clickbait. And somewhere along the way, the original heart of the theory, the question of survival, connection, and human need, got lost in translation. So where does that leave us? Attachment theory is real. It has roots in science. It has evidence, but it has also been stretched, distorted, and simplified to fit screens and sound bites. Which leaves us with the question, is attachment theory still a tool for understanding human connection? Or has it become a brand, a story we consume, a lens that shapes how we see ourselves? Even if it doesn't fully fit, that's the tension, that's the debate. And that's why, to understand whether it's still science, we have to ask another question. What happens when a theory leaves the lab and enters the marketplace of attention? From science to self-help, attachment theory didn't stay in the lab. It didn't stay in research papers. It didn't stay in the world of child psychology. It crossed over. And once it crossed over, it became something else entirely. Because science is slow, painfully slow. Years of studies, peer reviews, replication, caution. But culture? Culture is fast. Culture is hungry. Culture wants answers today, not after a decade of controlled trials. So what happens when something slow and careful meets something fast and impulsive? You get self-help. You get popular psychology. You get attachment theory turned into a brand. Let's rewind to the 1980s. Researchers like Cindy Hazan and Philip Shaver began applying attachment theory to adult romantic relationships. They argued that the same patterns Ainsworth found in toddlers were mirrored in adults: secure, avoidant, anxious, and it made intuitive sense. The clingy partner, the distant one, the one who feels safe and steady. It was relatable. It clicked. It spread. But here's the thing about psychology. When something is relatable, it risks becoming oversimplified. Because people love clarity. They love categories. They love saying, this is who I am. This is who they are. The science gave language. Culture gave it megaphones. By the 1990s and 2000s, attachment theory moved beyond academia and into bookstores. Titles exploded on its shelves. Attached, Hold Me Tight, The Attachment Effect. Books that translated research into everyday language. Books that promised to explain why you love the way you do. Books that made attachment theory personal, emotional, and actionable. And for millions of people, it was a revelation. They finally had words for what they'd felt all their lives. I'm anxious. That's why I panic when they don't text back. They're avoidant. That's why they shut down when I get close. Secure. That's what I've always wanted to be. It felt liberating. It felt healing. It felt true. But here's the problem. When a scientific framework becomes a self-help movement, something subtle shifts. The edges blur. The caveats disappear. The gray areas get lost. Science speaks in probabilities. It says, some people may lean this way in certain contexts. It depends on environment and history. Attachment patterns can change over time. But self-help? Self-help speaks in absolutes. You are anxious. They are avoidant. This is why your relationships always fail. What was once a flexible lens became a rigid identity. What was once a set of observations became a personality test. And what was once science became content. Fast forward to the 2010s. Social media explodes. Suddenly, everyone has a platform. Instagram, YouTube, podcasts, TikTok, and attachment theory. It goes viral because it has all the right ingredients. Simple categories, relatable pain, clear villains and victims, hope of transformation. It's perfect for the algorithm, so now you see it everywhere. 10 signs your ex is avoidant. Why anxious people always attract avoidance. Here's the text that will make them commit. Catchy titles, quick hits, easy dopamine. But notice the shift. The science is gone. The nuance is gone. The evidence is barely mentioned. Instead, attachment theory becomes a story people tell themselves to make sense of their heartbreak, to explain rejection, to explain desire. And it works, not because it's perfect science, but because it's emotionally powerful. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Self-help isn't about truth. It's about resonance. It's about giving people a mirror in which they recognize themselves. And attachment theory, stripped down and packaged, is one of the clearest mirrors we've ever had. But a mirror isn't the same as reality. A mirror reflects. It doesn't explain. And yet, millions of people now live by these reflections. They Google their ex's attachment style. They diagnose dates after one conversation. They categorize themselves as anxious or avoidant and feel locked in forever. What began as description becomes prescription. What began as science becomes destiny. And then comes monetization. Because once something resonates, someone will package it. Someone will sell it. Coaches, courses, webinars, TikTok therapists, YouTube channels. Pay me $99 and I'll heal your anxious attachment. Sign up for my course and I'll teach you how to make your avoidant ex chase you. Attachment theory, once a framework for understanding, is now a commodity. And commodities don't need accuracy. They need sales, which means the complexity gets shaved away. The uncertainty gets buried. The gray areas vanish. What's left is a product, a neat, bite-sized explanation for your pain. But does this mean attachment theory is fake? Does it mean it's not science anymore? Not exactly, because underneath the marketing, there's still research. There are still studies showing patterns of attachment in childhood, predicting certain behaviors in adulthood. There's truth, but it's partial truth, context-dependent truth, truth that needs nuance. The problem isn't the theory itself. The problem is what happens when you take a careful theory and feed it to a culture that demands quick answers. That culture doesn't want "it depends." It wants "this is who they are." It doesn't want probabilities. It wants predictions. It doesn't want slow science. It wants fast certainty. So here we are. Attachment theory exists in two worlds. In the academic world, it's studied, debated, refined, questioned. It's cautious. It's measured. In the cultural world, it's viral, simplified, emotional, monetized. It's catchy, it's addictive, and between those two worlds, something gets lost. The truth gets stretched. The science gets blurred. The framework becomes folklore. And yet, people keep coming back to it. Because at the end of the day, whether it's science or clickbait, attachment theory feels like it explains us. It feels like it names the unspoken. It feels like it gives shape to the ache. And in a world hungry for answers, that feeling may matter more than scientific precision. So the question isn't just, is attachment theory still science? It's also this: does it even matter to people? Whether it's science, as long as it gives them meaning? The trap of labels. Labels feel good. They give order to chaos. They give names to feelings we thought were nameless. They make the invisible visible. That's the beauty of attachment theory. It hands you a map, a compass, a set of categories. You finally say, "Oh, I'm anxious." That explains everything. Or, "They're avoidant." That explains why they pulled away. And for a while, that label feels like salvation. It feels like truth. It feels like clarity. But here's the catch. What starts as clarity can quietly become a cage. Think about what a label does. It reduces complexity. It takes a living, breathing, changing human being and compresses them into a single word. Anxious, avoidant, secure. 3 words to summarize millions of moments, thousands of choices, decades of experiences. Is that fair? Is that accurate? Of course not. But it feels easier. Because life without labels is messy. Messy is exhausting. Messy leaves you spinning. So we cling to labels, even if they shrink us down. Here's the irony. Attachment theory was never meant to be a cage. When Bowlby first wrote, he spoke of attachment as a dynamic system. Something alive, something adaptive, something shaped by both past and present. Mary Ainsworth's research showed how children might behave one way in one situation and differently in another. Even in Hazan and Shaver's adult studies, people didn't fit perfectly into boxes. Some leaned anxious here, some avoidant there. Many showed signs of both. It was always messy, always fluid, always contextual. But culture hates messy, so the nuance was shaved off. Now we talk about attachment styles, as if they're zodiac signs. You're anxious, they're avoidant. That's it. Case closed. But what happens when you believe the label too much? You start living as if it's destiny. I'm anxious, so of course I'm clingy. I'm avoidant, so of course I can't commit. I'm secure, but that means I'll always be fine. The label becomes a prophecy. It stops being a description and becomes an identity. And once you identify with it, you stop questioning it. You stop asking, is this true right now? Do I have other choices? Can I grow beyond this? Instead, you live inside the story. The label tells for you. But here's the danger. Labels don't just shape how we see ourselves. They shape how we see others. Think about dating apps. Think about first dates. Think about conversations with friends. How many times have you heard someone say, "Oh, he's avoidant. Don't waste your time. She's anxious. She'll smother you. He's secure. He's a unicorn." It sounds neat. It sounds helpful. But what it really does is flatten people. A person who struggles to open up, labeled as hopelessly avoidant. A person who texts more than you like, labeled as unbearably anxious. A person who seems balanced, labeled as securely perfect. And suddenly, you're not relating to a person anymore. You're relating to a label. This is where the trap tightens. Because once you relate to someone as a label, you stop seeing their full humanity. You miss the fact that the avoidant who pulls away might actually be carrying trauma that has nothing to do with you. You miss the fact that the anxious who clings might simply have been abandoned before and is fighting for reassurance. You miss the fact that the secure person might still have insecurities and fears, but just manages them differently. Labels reduce empathy. They reduce curiosity. They make us think we already know someone before we've even listened. And in relationships, that's deadly, because real love requires curiosity. It requires openness. It requires staying with the mess, not rushing to simplify it. Now let's talk about the algorithm. Because social media doesn't just reflect labels, it multiplies them. Scroll through TikTok, and you'll see endless quick takes. If he's avoidant, he'll ghost you. If she's anxious, she'll blow up your phone. If you're secure, you'll never have drama. Easy, digestible, addictive. And the comments section? It's full of people diagnosing themselves, diagnosing their partners, diagnosing their exes. My ex was totally avoidant. I'm anxious, and this explains everything. He's secure, that's why I can't get over him. It feels like community. It feels like connection. But underneath, it's just echo chambers of labels. But wait, what happens when people actually change? Because here's the truth. People do change. Therapy, healing, time, new experiences, safer relationships. The anxious person can become calmer. The avoidant can learn to open up. The secure can stumble in hard seasons. Attachment isn't fixed. It's plastic. It bends. It grows. It heals. But if you've locked someone into a label, you might never give them room to grow. And worse, if you've locked yourself into a label, you might never give yourself room to grow. Let's make this concrete. Imagine you're anxious. You believe it deeply. You tell every new partner, I'm just anxious. That's who I am. So when you feel triggered, instead of working on self-regulation, you justify it. Instead of saying, how can I learn to soothe myself? You say, well, this is just my attachment style. The label becomes a shield, a way to avoid responsibility. Now imagine the avoidant. They say, I'm just not built for closeness. So instead of facing the fear of intimacy, they use the label as an excuse. They don't try. They don't stretch. They don't risk. See the trap? The label doesn't just explain behavior. It locks it in. Even therapy isn't immune. Many therapists use attachment language because it's relatable for clients. And it works. To a point. It helps clients feel seen. It helps them connect the dots. It helps them find language. But the danger is this. Therapy can accidentally reinforce the label. Instead of moving beyond it, you walk out of sessions saying, I'm anxious, so that's my problem. Instead of saying, I've learned anxious patterns, but I can grow beyond them. See the difference? One keeps you stuck. The other sets you free. So what's the way out of the trap? It's not about rejecting attachment theory. It's not about pretending labels don't help. They do. The way out is remembering the label is just a tool, a starting point, not a prison sentence. It's saying, yes, I may lean anxious, but I'm not only anxious. Yes, they may lean avoidant, but they're not just avoidant. Yes, secure is the goal, but even secure people have struggles. Labels are doorways, not destinations. And maybe that's the ultimate test of whether attachment theory is still science or just clickbait. Science invites complexity. Clickbait reduces it. Science says, this is one possible lens. Clickbait says, this is who you are forever. One opens your mind. The other closes it. So when you find yourself using labels, pause. Ask yourself, am I using this label as a lens to understand? Or am I using it as a lock to imprison? Because that difference might decide whether attachment theory heals you or traps you. The algorithm's favorite drug. The internet is a machine, a hungry one. It doesn't care about truth. It doesn't care about nuance. It cares about one thing: attention. Attention is the new currency. The more a platform holds your gaze, the more ads it can sell. The more you scroll, the more money it makes. So what kind of content wins? Not the careful, not the complex, not the nuanced. What wins is simple, sticky, emotional, addictive. And attachment theory? It's perfect for this. Think about what makes something go viral. It has to be relatable. It has to be emotional. It has to feel like it explains your life in one punch. Anxious people always text first. Avoidants always ghost. Secure people are the prize. One line, one archetype, one shot of recognition, and boom, millions of likes. That's the drug. Instant clarity, instant belonging, instant identity. But here's the problem. The algorithm doesn't reward truth. It rewards extremes. So a nuanced statement like, some people with avoidant tendencies struggle with intimacy, but they can also be deeply loyal in certain contexts, won't go viral. It's too long, too careful, too boring for the feed. What goes viral instead? Once avoidant, always avoidant. Run. Or anxious people will ruin your life. Or secure is the only real option. See it? It's not science anymore. It's slogans. Let's make this concrete. Imagine you're scrolling late at night. You just got ghosted. You're raw. You're vulnerable. You're looking for answers. And suddenly, a video pops up. Signs he's avoidant and why he'll never change. Your brain lights up. Dopamine floods. It feels like truth. It feels like an explanation. It feels like justice. So you click. You watch. You comment. You share. The algorithm notices. And now, it feeds you 10 more just like it. Now your feed is full of avoidant villains and anxious disasters. You're locked in. That's how the drug works. But the side effects? They're brutal. Because the more you consume, the more your worldview narrows. You stop seeing shades of gray. You stop seeing individual differences. Instead, you start to believe the algorithm's version of reality. Everyone is anxious, or avoidant, or toxic, or doomed. And suddenly, attachment theory isn't helping you heal. It's feeding your pain. It's reinforcing your wounds. It's keeping you hooked. The scary part? This isn't an accident. Platforms are designed to maximize engagement. And nothing engages like pain. Nothing engages like heartbreak. Nothing engages like fear. So the system takes your heartbreak, your vulnerability, your desperate need for answers, and it weaponizes it. It says, oh, you're heartbroken? Here, watch 20 more heartbreak videos. Oh, you're anxious? Here, read 20 more anxious quotes. Oh, you're wondering if they'll come back? Here, endless predictions about avoidance returning. It doesn't heal you. It hooks you. That's why I call it a drug. Let's dig deeper. The drug works like this. Step 1, pain. You go through a breakup. You're lost. You're searching. Step 2, content. You find a clip that names your pain. It feels like medicine. Step 3, reinforcement. The algorithm floods you with more. Now you're binging. Step 4, identity. You start identifying with the label. I'm anxious. That's who I am. Step 5, dependence. Now you need the content. You crave the next video, the next post, the next dose of clarity. Step 6, loop. You stay stuck. Not healing, not growing, just consuming. That's not science. That's addiction. And here's the saddest part. What started as a tool for healing is now fueling obsession. Attachment theory was meant to free people, to help them understand, regulate, grow. But on social media, It's become a cage, a loop, a drug. It doesn't guide you out of the maze. It keeps you running in circles. But wait, there's another layer. The creators themselves. Many are well-meaning. Therapists, coaches, survivors. People who genuinely want to help. But they face the same pressure. If they post nuanced, careful content, it flops. If they post bold, black and white statements, it blows up. So what do? They simplify. They exaggerate. They dramatize. Not because they want to mislead, but because the system rewards it. And little by little, the line between education and entertainment blurs. Before long, attachment theory isn't being taught. It's being performed. Let's pause here. This isn't just about TikTok or Instagram. It's about human psychology. Our brains crave certainty. They crave simple answers. They crave narratives that make sense of chaos. And when we're hurting, we crave it even more. That's why clickbait thrives. That's why algorithms feast. It's not just the platforms. It's us. We want the drug. We choose the drug. We keep taking the drug. So what's the cost? The cost is subtle, but it's huge. The more we consume this kind of content, the less we tolerate complexity, the less we tolerate nuance, the less we tolerate reality. We start expecting relationships to fit clean categories. We start expecting people to behave like the posts say. We start expecting ourselves to stay locked into our labels. And when reality doesn't match the script, we get frustrated. We get lost. We feel broken. When in truth, we're not broken. We're just human, messy, complex, fluid. But the drug doesn't sell that story. The drug sells certainty. And here's the most heartbreaking thing. Healing requires the opposite of certainty. Healing requires patience. It requires sitting with ambiguity. It requires embracing mess. It requires facing complexity. But the algorithm doesn't reward patience. It doesn't reward mess. It doesn't reward slowness. So instead of healing, we keep scrolling. We keep searching. We keep diagnosing. And little by little, we trade growth for consumption. We trade science for slogans. We trade healing for hits of dopamine. That's the cost of the drug. But there's a glimmer of hope. Because once you see the game, you can step outside of it. Once you realize the algorithm isn't designed to heal you, you can stop expecting it to. You can use content as a starting point, not an ending point. You can say, yes, this post resonates, but it's just a piece of the puzzle. Yes, that video feels true, but I need to explore deeper. Yes, this label helps, but it doesn't define me forever. That shift turns the drug back into medicine. And maybe that's the challenge for all of us. To resist the drug, to reclaim the science, to demand nuance. Because attachment theory isn't clickbait. It's not entertainment. It's not destiny. It's a framework, a tool, a lens. And if we keep letting the algorithm reduce it, we lose the gift it could actually give. The gift of understanding. The gift of compassion. The gift of growth. That's the drug's biggest lie. That scrolling is healing. Healing doesn't happen in the feed. It happens in your life, in your choices, in your courage to go beyond the label. And that's the truth. No algorithm will ever sell you. Escaping the clickbait loop. The loop is seductive. It feels safe. It feels clarifying. It feels like control. But the loop is also a trap. Because every time you scroll for another post, every time you chase another label, every time you cling to another sign or rule, you're not moving forward. You're circling the same track. Healing is movement. Clickbait is repetition. And those two don't live in the same place. Let's start with a hard truth. The loop isn't just outside you. It's inside you. The algorithm can only hook what already exists in your nervous system: your hunger for certainty, your fear of abandonment, your craving for reassurance. That's why the loop feels so powerful. It doesn't just manipulate your attention, it mirrors your wounds. Think of it this way: when you're anxiously attached, you already overanalyze texts. You already search for signs. You already live in what ifs. The algorithm just amplifies it. It gives you endless fuel, endless signs, endless proof. And when you're avoidantly attached, you already lean toward withdrawal. You already rationalize distance. You already create narratives of self-sufficiency. The algorithm feeds that too. It floods your feed with independence hacks. Why you don't need anyone. Why cutting people off is strength. See it? The loop isn't random. It's personal, tailored, surgical. That's why breaking free feels so hard. But here's the deeper question. How do you escape? Not just by deleting apps, not just by swearing off content, but by stepping back into your own authority. Because the loop steals something more dangerous than your time. It steals your trust in yourself. It convinces you that the answers live out there, in the next post, the next video, the next expert. But the answers? They've always been in you. Let's slow down here. Escaping the clickbait loop is not about rejecting attachment theory. It's about reclaiming it. It's about pulling it back from the claws of algorithms and returning it to its original power as a map for understanding, not a script for doom. And to do that, you need to practice three things: awareness, discernment, and courage. Awareness is step one. You have to see the loop. Name it. Notice when it's happening. Ask yourself, am I watching this because it helps me grow, or because it scratches my wound? That question alone can break the trance. Because once you see the drug for what it is, it loses some of its grip. Discernment is step two. Not all content is poison. Some creators are careful. Some messages are thoughtful. Some resources really do expand your healing. Discernment is learning to tell the difference. Does the content invite reflection, or does it push you into reaction? Does it empower your agency, or does it trap you in a label? Does it expand your compassion, or does it feed your fear? That's discernment. And courage? That's the hardest part. Because courage is what it takes to step away from the feed, to sit in the silence, to face your patterns directly, without the constant noise, without the endless reassurance, without the identity of anxious or avoidant to lean on. Courage is building real intimacy. Courage is risking vulnerability. Courage is holding yourself steady. When no post is telling you what to do, that's where healing lives. But maybe you're wondering, why does this even matter? If attachment clickbait helps some people feel seen, isn't that better than nothing? Yes and no. Yes, because recognition matters. Labels can validate. They can give language to pain. They can open the door. But no, because recognition without depth becomes a prison. If you never move beyond the label, you never step into growth. It's like being diagnosed with a wound, but never treating it. You just keep naming it over and over. That's not healing. That's identification. So what does real healing look like? It looks messy. It looks slow. It looks like trial and error. It looks like having hard conversations instead of just labeling the other person avoidant. It looks like regulating your nervous system instead of binging anxious attachment signs. It looks like practicing secure behaviors before you feel secure inside. Healing isn't glamorous. It doesn't trend. It doesn't go viral, but it transforms. And that's what the loop can never give you. Let's put this in a metaphor. Clickbait is like fast food. It's salty. It's sweet. It hits the spot instantly, but it doesn't nourish you. and too much of it makes you sick. Real healing is like home-cooked meals. It takes longer. It's less flashy. Sometimes it tastes bland compared to the quick fix, but it sustains you. It strengthens you. It heals you from the inside out. That's the difference. Here's another truth. Escaping the loop doesn't mean you'll never be tempted again. It doesn't mean you'll never scroll late at night. It doesn't mean you'll never crave that dopamine hit. It means you'll notice faster. You'll pause sooner. You'll return to yourself more quickly, because the loop loses power the moment you stop outsourcing your worth to it. When you trust yourself more than the feed, you're free. And maybe this is the real test of whether attachment theory is still science. Not how many posts go viral, not how many diagnoses get recycled, not how many breakup accounts explode, but whether we, as individuals, use the theory to deepen our humanity, or whether we let it reduce us to caricatures. Science is about curiosity, about exploration, about expanding what's possible. Clickbait is about certainty, about finality, about narrowing what's possible. One liberates, the other cages. So ask yourself, which one are you feeding? Are you feeding the loop, or are you feeding your growth? Because in the end, the theory itself doesn't decide. The algorithm doesn't decide. Even the creators don't decide. You do. You decide how you engage. You decide whether you stay stuck. You decide whether attachment theory becomes a cage or a compass. And maybe that's the invitation here. To stop letting the algorithm define you. To stop letting the labels shrink you. To stop letting clickbait consume your pain. Instead, to step back into your own agency. To use theory as a mirror, not as a destiny. To let yourself be complex. To let others be complex. To let relationships be more than archetypes. That's how you escape the loop. Not by rejecting the framework, but by reclaiming it. And if you do, something beautiful happens. Attachment theory stops being clickbait. It stops being entertainment. It stops being doom. It becomes what it was always meant to be. A language for love. A guide for growth. A bridge between isolation and connection. That's the real story. That's the part the algorithm won't tell you. Because it can't be packaged into 30 seconds. It can't be boiled into one slogan. It can't be sold like a drug. It has to be lived. It has to be embodied. It has to be practiced. And that is your work. So if you've been stuck in the loop, if you've been scrolling for answers, if you've been chasing clarity and labels, take this as your sign. Not a sign to doom. Not a sign to diagnose. A sign to return. To yourself. To your complexity. To your growth. Because the science isn't dead. It's waiting. It's waiting for you to use it wisely. To turn it back into medicine. To make it your own. And maybe that's the only way to answer the question. Is attachment theory still science? Yes, but only if you let it be.